So I'm Ann Heffron, and I was born in 1964, and I was adopted in 1965. Um, I grew up um, knowing I was adopted, um, thinking that I was normal, thinking that my family, well, no, actually, I didn't think my family was normal. I knew they weren't normal, but I thought we were supposed to be normal. And then when I was about 50, all of my coping mechanisms, getting married and spending money and um, moving around, eating sugar, all those things stopped working for me. And I I hit this wall where I understood. Um, I think I need to think about my birth mother. And I knew that because one morning I woke up thinking, the thought came to me, oh my gosh, I was born and maybe she never held me. And I never had that thought till I was 50 or 50 something. And that thought was so shocking to me. And so I thought, okay, what do I do with this? And then I thought, okay, well, do the thing that you think you shouldn't do and write it down. So I got some flashcards and like a little kid story I wrote about, I think I called it I called it Who the Fuck Are You? And and I wrote about being born and being held by strangers. And I tucked that story away in my backpack. And then uh, my life just kept falling apart more and more. And then I think this is the order of events. I thought, okay, what's the bravest thing I could do? And I thought, I'm going to read this story and I'm going to make a video and I'm going to put it on YouTube. And I wasn't on social media a lot. I just thought, I thought the worst thing, like that felt like a pirate move. That felt like a bank robber move. Like, I'm going to take this story, I'm going to make it public. And so I went to my brother's farm and my nephew uh, recorded me doing it. You can hear him sighing because he's so bored. But I posted it, and now when I look at it, it seems so innocent. But really, at the time, I thought I had broken some very big rules. And then I was I'd been trying to write a story, any story, for 30 years. I went to graduate school and had an MFA, but I couldn't I just couldn't find the story. I couldn't find what mattered. And I went to a writing retreat and I met Kitty Stockett, who had written the book The Help. And I at the end of the retreat, I was so disappointed because the woman had told me, she said, I can get you to write your story. And she hadn't. So at the end, she was having everybody read some of their work. And I was sort of like, okay, well, fuck you. I'm going to read this really stupid story. I'm going to show you how stupid this retreat was. And so I pulled the story out of my backpack and I read it, and like, people were crying. And I I did not understand. And Kitty offered me, she said, if you ever want a place to write, you could have my New York apartment for a little bit. And I was like, well, okay, well, I just used every penny I've ever had. Actually, this whole thing went on a credit card. So I don't even have the pennies to pay for this retreat. But thank you. And I went back to my life and I realized, you know what? It's worth you more than anything you want to tell your story. So it's worth getting in more debt that you can even just bury yourself. Just so I applied for all these credit cards, and I got this a writing residency in Martha's Vineyard that I paid for 2 weeks, and I was at Kitty's house for 2 weeks, and I I went, and um, it didn't happen. And I was at Martha's Vineyard, and I I was writing the same stuff I had always written. I couldn't do it. And this was all I had, was my story and the desire to tell it. And I got up early one morning and I texted my friend and I said, I can't do it. And I said, I don't know what my story is. I don't know who my audience is. I don't know who would care. And I'm afraid that um, if I keep writing, I'm going to have to say I have value, and I'm not sure I'm ready to do that. And that last line was probably the truest thing I'd ever written. And normally I would have erased it. But because I was so just like, oh God, I sent it to him and he wrote back right away and he said, that's your voice. And I've been on fire ever since because that that line, I don't know if I can keep writing because I'll have to say I have value, came from the middle of me. It was the truest. It was the things that if I had said them to my parents were the things that would have gotten dismissed, or if I had said them to other people, it would have been dismissed because it was weird. But what I learned was, oh, okay, this is between me and some higher power. Like, I just need to get this story out. I'm not going to think about all those people because they're not a good audience for me. So it's me and the ear. And it was really hard and beautiful to write it. And Kitty gave me her apartment for 2 more months. So I was in New York for 2.5 months in this amazing apartment. And I wrote it, and then I had to go home. And that was hard, because I thought either I'd die, or I guess I thought the universe would save me somehow and give me $1 million, and it didn't. And so, I mean, I had no money and I had very little will left because I had done something. I had broken all the rules. And so I didn't have the energy to go get a job. Like, my car was repossessed. I mean, I was living, my writing partner for movies, she let me live in her house, and I slept on the floor. Like, I didn't even want a bed. I was like, I'm going to sleep on the floor. And it might have looked normal from the outside because I was coping. I was doing the best that I could. But when I look back at the past, it's been 5 years now. It was hard. It was really hard because I didn't have any. I was hard on myself. There was plenty of people around to help me. I when I look at it, I didn't have the setup for what do you do after you tell your story. It was just sort of like, oh my God, this thing's out there. Who am I now? Like, all my life I've wanted to tell it. I did tell it. And I don't have a plan. Like, I don't, I didn't know, okay, well, so I named what happened, but I hadn't given myself permission to move forward and be a person. I just named the wound without growing, without allowing myself to really exist. I existed as a story. I existed as a trauma story. So then I was surrounded by people who now I knew how to tell my story so I could help other people, because I figured out, like, I knew there was just these stupid blocks that were in my way. So I'm excited to help other people because I see how easily you can clear them off. It's just confusion. But it's really important to plan for the future. Like, why do you want to tell that story? Are you telling it so that finally you can feel mirrored like a little kid with a mom? But the problem is you're not a little kid anymore. I mean, you have to go out into the world and have friends and a partner and a job and um um a month ago I took MDMA and psilocybin, and now everything's so much better because my I now understand. The story helped me with my brain. It helped me get the story straight, but the MDMA and the psilocybin helped me with my body, and I got to feel how much pain is in there. I got to experience death, and then I understood, oh, okay, it was even worse than I thought. Like, you didn't just have to tell your story, you actually had to feel the body trauma of being born and not being held by your mother and being held by the wrong people, even though in many ways they were, I can't say that, they were fine. And living a life of kind of one shock after the other. And to have, when I was on MDMA and when I twice I died, I felt like I was dying. One time I was choking on mud. My heart was mud. My body was mud. I was choking on mud. And then I went off into fantasy. And the therapist I was working with, she said, this is what you do. You escape reality by going into fantasy. And I was like, oh shit, this is what I've done. I read, my brain, I think my thoughts save me, right? Like, this is reality, but I'm going to have better thoughts than this. I'm not really here. Like, my brain creates this other world. It's not another world, but it's like I can think my way into a life, but it doesn't allow me just to be me, a person. I have to be better. Like, my brain can tell me ways, okay, you're going to be excellent. Like, you're going to be, it's going to be good. Because mostly my brain's like, you are in so much trouble. I'm just holding on most of the time. And the second pain that I felt was this incredible, it was like childbirth worse. Like, if I'd been on fire while I was giving birth, that would have been the pain. And I just kept saying, oh my God, oh my God. And the therapist said, I've never worked with an adoptee who hasn't died. Just stay with it. And the pain moved through my entire body, and then it lifted. And it was so incredible because, number one, I got to see, okay, it is as bad as I thought. It's worse than I thought. This is what I've been dealing with. And this is what we as a culture are dealing with. And I got really angry, like, oh my God, this is optional. People could help us so that we don't have to feel this. And the second thing is I felt really proud of myself. Like, oh, I felt it. Like, there's nothing, I can handle it. Like, I got this. I'm not afraid of my body anymore. And since then, that was about 5 weeks ago, and my mushrooms help your brain and MDMA helps your heart. And my brain has been making all sorts of really good decisions for me. It told me to stop working so much. So I stopped working so much. It told me stop eating gluten, dairy, and sugar, coffee, like all these things I have not been able to give up for decades. All of a sudden, it's just super easy because I'm not fighting my body anymore. I'm not fighting this invisible pain. Like I am the day after or maybe it was the day I did the MDMA, I just kept saying, I have a body. Like I can't believe I have a body. And I have a body. I don't have the afterglow is gone, which is sad. um, but it was stunning to think that this body is my body. And a big part of it was during the session, I recognized that my adoptive mother's unrealized hopes and dreams were in me, like this orange octopus tentacles. And so I was feeling that. And then I realized, oh my God, I've done that to my daughter. Like, I'm not fully alive. And I've put my stuff into her. So I pulled them out of her and I pulled them out of me. And then I could think like, oh, she has a body, I have a body, and my mother has a body. And now I'm just trying to negotiate the world. It's as a regular person with a body. It's I- it's it's like being very small and very it's almost like I've been wearing either a party dress or I've been covered with like dog shit my whole life. And now I'm just a person. And I don't know how to do this. So I walk in the woods a lot. I'm cutting down social media. Like I'm trying to cut down the noise because I need to get really quiet so that I can just be in relationship with my body. Um, it's so hard. I but it's also I'm making it a lot easier on myself because I'm letting myself take a lot of naps and um, it, it sort of circles all the way back to being born and being told that you're special because you were abandoned. And really, I was just born a person, but nobody told me that. Nobody just said you're just a person. Like, so your mom couldn't keep you. I mean, partly I'm sort of like, so what? Like, a lot of bad things happen to people. It's just that the way it was handled was so poor that I had to go through this giant circle of confusion to get back to this sort of rebirth of, oh, I'm a body in the world and I have agency and I can do what I want to do because I pulled the tentacles out. So it's not about her. It's also not about her. That the thing I have to process is it is okay for me to be a body with agency and to live my life not feeding other people, like with my life force. The other day I was at a gym and this woman sat next to me and I asked her what she does for work because we were talking and she said that she was a nurse in the NICU. And I said, oh, um, something about mothers being separated from their babies. And she said, oh, she said, the babies are very resilient. She said, we like for the moms to go home and to take care of themselves. And I didn't say anything because it was too big, but I felt really furious inside because if 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 I mean Boston has great hospitals, and so these are not podunk hospitals. So if they're thinking that it's no big deal for the mother and the baby to be separated, um, um, sort of like we're right back. We haven't gone anywhere. And my body, I'm a massage therapist. I'm very interested in the skin and my body and why it's so tight and why it feels kind of sick all the time. And I have a visceral understanding of, if when I had been born and if I had been placed on my mother's body and if I had latched onto her breast with my mouth, I would have been more a person. I would have been I would have been seen. This is what it means to be human. You feel with your skin, you feed yourself, like you do that. Um, and the bottle, yeah, I'm feeding myself. And I know a lot of people are bottle fed, and I bottle fed my daughter after a few months of nursing. But um, for if you're, it's just, it seems important. And I think the more skin contact with mother, the better. And I just don't understand. Um, in my, even just talking about it right now, my stomach feels sick, my head feels light. Like how you can, it's just like taking a cake out of the oven 10 minutes too early and just throwing frosting on it. And you know that disaster feeling when the cake starts peeling away and there's just all cake mixed up with the frosting and you just ruin the whole thing. That's what I feel like. I feel like my body was ruined and I just didn't get to finish cooking. And it's um, this systemic tightness that I have. I I've been getting work with massage with just my fascia, which is the connective tissue right underneath your skin. And I have this idea that when I was born, my body was available for strangers to touch everywhere. And that, you know, when like someone touches you and you kind of jerk, like I imagine that at first, like, let's say when my parents were first changing my diapers or something and they're touching me like in my butt, that my whole kind of sphincter area would contract and pull up. And because they're nervous, because their energy is nervous energy, what I imagine is that pulling up became a systemic thing where my whole body pulled up. And that became my shape. Like I didn't get a chance to let go. And I'm trying to let go now, but I'm 58 years old and it took a long time for me to get this way. And when the fascial massage therapist was working on me and she picked up my right arm and she said, "You're not in your arm." And I could feel it. I could feel, whoa, there's nothing. And I said, you know what? I don't want to be in there. Like I just say what's ever in my head. And we couldn't get me in my arm. So I came back 2 weeks later for another session and she kept moving my arm around. And I was thinking, you know what? I refuse to be in this arm. Like if I'm in this arm, I agree to be in this body. And this is my right arm. No, I'm not in this arm. But then I started thinking of things I could do with my arm, you know, like I could write. And that has its own expense because then I'm going to write things that will push other people away. It means I exist. And my existence is threatening to people, to some people. But this massage, she was so wonderful. And she just kept lightly moving my fascia. And then all of a sudden, I entered my arm. And what was wild was all I could feel was energy. I didn't feel my arm. I couldn't tell you where my elbow was. I just felt. And then I told her, "Oh my God, I know how Magic Johnson and Larry Bird. I know how they play basketball now. I know like they just become energy. Like there's, it can just flow through you if you're not afraid some stranger's going to come and try to take you or grab you, because you can't flow if you have to protect at the same time. And so I have to have these really clear boundaries about, this is who I am, this is who's allowed to touch me, this is um, like, I take care of this body now. I feed it good food. I don't get it all wired on coffee, because I have an understanding that um, this is precious. And it takes, I can be mindful and present, but I am no longer agreeing to give myself away to other people, um, because that's what happened when I was born. Like, I am a new person, which is exciting, but frankly, mostly it's heartbreaking, because like, who wants to be a new person? Like, I would rather just be the same person and not have to reinvent myself. I feel ripped off, kind of, like, I want it. I don't want to. It's like, okay, you can be yourself, but you have to give up these 3 suitcases you've been carrying your whole life. And took a lot of work to carry them. So do I just want to put them down? But I'm learning, yes. But this, I'm writing a book now, and the thing that I wrote in it that I feel like is the thing that's gonna be the most controversial is that instead of separating babies from their moms, they should just take the babies out behind the hospital and shoot them. And I was writing, and after I wrote You Don't Look Adopted, I was aware that I was saying things that people, my family, potential dates, my daughter, my friends, the whole world, like, not that the whole world was reading it, but anybody that picked it up, I felt like, okay, they're going to make assumptions. I'm sort of a victim. I'm whiny. I wrote about wearing the same pair of underwear for a year because I didn't have the courage to ask my mom for a new pair. I wrote about my parents in a way that my family, in particular her siblings, found insulting. But I, when that thing happened at Martha's Vineyard, when it became, okay, this is my story, I just figured, a daisy doesn't ask to be a daisy. And I hadn't asked to be myself. And so a daisy gets to just sit there and be a daisy. So why can't I just sit here and be myself? So that means I can tell you my story the way that I know it. And if my family gets angry with me because I'm a daisy, then they're not my family, and they're not my friends. And the problem was, I didn't come out fighting. I didn't come out, I didn't publish that book and feel I wasn't ready, because I was still apologetic. I was still trying to be on both sides of the fence. Like, someone would say, I read your book, and I'd be like, oh, I'm so embarrassed, like, instead of like, like, spine straight, head straight. Yeah, that's my story. I was really, I didn't know how to negotiate having written, having not been the compliant adoptee anymore, and then still trying to be her in some ways. And I think it's important to plan and to, like, know, okay, it's not my job to make everyone like me. And if they don't like me because I told my truth, there's something terribly mean and small about them. That's like patting a bunny and putting your hand over its nose and then wondering why the bunny's having problems. I mean, they're basically not letting us breathe if we can't be ourselves. So um, I'd rather just be me and my dog than, than have to deal with that. I wish I could go back in time and give myself a pep talk and say, it's okay that this is your story. It's okay that you, it's okay that this happened to you. It's okay that this is the way you behaved. It's okay that you have mistakes in your book. It's like, this book is a mirror reflection of you. And like, maybe I should have gone to a therapist. I couldn't afford anything, but I think I needed a therapist, like, to help me validate that it is okay to have a mirror reflection, um, one that other people might not love. Because it doesn't matter how many other people, like, if, if 100 adoptees say, I like your book, but my aunt and uncle are like, I'm going to hear the, not the 100 people that liked it. So I think it's important for us to have things in place for this is sort of the process of what to do after you publish your book, what to expect, sort of places to go for help, because it's a really vulnerable place to be. I mean, it's like if in a Miss America pageant, if one of them walked out naked, sort of like, and then nobody said anything, and then they're just standing there like naked, like, oh God, I think I was supposed to wear a bikini. Maybe this isn't quite the right analogy, but it sort of felt, that's how it felt. It felt like I had made myself really naked but no one else was naked around me. And I didn't have instead of being like my daughter when she was a little girl and going like, woo, slapping my own butt, like, woo, look at me. Instead, I was sort of like, okay, I'm naked, but oh, I'm also ashamed. Yeah. Like it would have been better, more fun to drop the shame part. Yeah, the writing itself, those 3 months were the best 3 months of my life. Someone, an incredible writer, had seen me and had validated my existence by basically giving me this, it felt like a palace to live in. And I was taking myself seriously. If I could live in those 3 months for my whole life, I would do that happily. Because I would go get coffee, come back, write. And if I was tired, I would go lay down. If I was crying, I would cry. And then I would go on Tinder. I would get a date. So I would have contact with a person, like I'd go out into the world, but I didn't let myself get lost in New York. Like I was very focused on write, and be yourself. And like I would have cheesecake for lunch. I didn't exercise. It was amazing. So when I had gone to graduate school, 30 years earlier, I had the opportunity to do the same thing, but I didn't have the freedom to tell that story. Well, I could have done it. I just didn't know that I could have. And so that's why when I teach Write or Die, I just feel like, oh my God, if my teachers had only known what questions to ask me, they could have gotten me off this track of writing around the subject. And then I could have had that New York experience, but in a university where I had support. But I just didn't know it was okay to write this. So I had to go off kind of stealthily and isolate myself in what was an incredible experience in order to get this done. If people struggle to tell their story, I think a phrase I use over and over again is, what I really want to tell you is. And so you're trying to trick your brain into saying one truth thing, and you feel it when you write it. Like, what I really want to tell you is I love my dog. And like something happens inside of you where it's probably like when someone's searching for oil, and they find the oil, you'll feel it in your body, like, oh, I have a lot to say about this. And there's recycled thoughts where you have a lot to say, but you're just tapping into the spin. It's that sort of like, thing that when you just vomit your story up, the same thing all over so many people. It's not that. It's something that cost you something. It's like drawing blood almost. It's like, oh, okay, this, I think it's getting used to the discomfort, like getting used to feeling like either this is boring, and it'll feel boring because it's you, but you'll also kind of know, or or okay, this, I feel like I'm gonna pass out, and like just little, like, write really simple sentences. Be careful if you start using words that you wouldn't use normally, you're going into some other place. It's a way of avoiding saying the truth. So if you have to, just write like a third grader and describe what you're feeling, and know that it's really what you're writing is very simple. So keep it simple. You were separated from your mother and you're in a lot of pain. And we act it out in different ways. So it's observing yourself like a science experiment. What happens when you take a baby away from its mother? Well, you're reporting, this is what happened. And you can take, if you can remove yourself from the shame and just look, because it's not your fault, and just look at it, and just describe it, um, just kind of sneak your way in there. The role of the father. Um, I didn't have strong father figures on either side. So it's probably why I'm not married. I'm pretty yeah, so I'm not a real expert on fathers. I sort of I can't even imagine. I just realized I can't even imagine having a strong, like a s- a strong father figure where I would rest my head on his shoulder. It's hard for me to even talk. It makes me want to cry even talking about. I feel bad for my dad. I feel um um yeah, that's a I'm angry. um both, it's like both my birth father and my adoptive father, they did the best they could, but man, they were just kind of weak. The In my mind, the birth mother suffers the most out of the three in the triad, because she, even if the baby was taken from her, she still has to live with what could I have done to have fought that. And I think of it as Velcro, like something was ripped from her brain before her brain was ready for it to go. And um I think it's horrific. I I I I I just um it's just not natural. And I understand that some mothers really, they got pregnant by mistake and they really just didn't want the baby. And I understand that it is a wonderful option, like, to be able to give your baby to someone else that wants it. Um, but I don't, um, if I meet a woman like that, I don't really believe her when she says it's fine. It 9 times out of, like, what, I don't know numbers, but chances are good she drinks. Chances are good she does something that's pretty seriously kicking her own self in the guts. You don't have to look very far. Online community of adoptees has changed everything. I mean, for me, it was Haley. I mean, I'm so glad you're doing a podcast, because it was Haley Radke's Adoptees On. That was my doorway in to the adoptee community. I had no idea it existed. And just it's incredible. And when I do the adoptee retreats with Pam Cardano, and um, the first day we ask people so there'll be 8 or 10 people in the room, and we'll say, everybody who's adopted, raise your hand. And everybody raises their hand, and there is there is a different resonance. Everybody feels it. It's just like the cells of our bodies are reorganizing themselves because finally we are in the same air. And I think that I find the online community is also very hard. I've never been bullied in my whole life until I was in the adoptee online community. And then I've just had people come after me. And that was shocking because I just couldn't believe an adoptee would attack another adoptee. I mean, it's a reason to stay away because it can be so cruel. And adoptees are very hard on adoptive parents online, super dismissive. And I do understand, but I also think cruelty is and rudeness aren't good for our souls, I don't think. But I do understand that hurt people, and that we have a lot of anger. But man, I think we should protect each other. I feel like we're this tribe, and I just feel like it should be this sacred group where everybody gets to be themselves. We're not all the same. We don't have to have all the same beliefs. I think someone was upset that I was maybe supporting someone who supports adoptive moms. And my feeling is let everybody do their thing. It's not my job to say what's right and what's not right as far as the whole community goes. Everybody has to try different things. All we can do is help lift up each other's voices and be kind. And that doesn't seem that hard. I mean, I've been low, really low, where I just thought this is too hard. I can't connect with people. I don't like myself. I don't make enough money to survive. Like, this life is not for me. But I think so much of it is I am in my own way. My brain is telling me stories. The world is available to me. Everything is available to me. I have to. I'm working with the Harvard basketball coach right now. She's the winningest coach in Ivy League history, and I'm helping her write her story. And it's really helpful to me to write about women who are tough, and that I don't think I was encouraged to be tough as a baby and as a child, because if I was tough, I would have said sort of fuck you a lot, and like had a voice. And so I think it is exciting to realize what it means to be a body that has its own opinions and its own desires. And my friendship with Pam Cardano, who is an adoptee, completely changed my life. I mean, it was like I was Venus Williams, and I could hit the tennis ball really hard, but I could never find the right player, because also sometimes I would fall down and start crying. And then I found Pam, and she played the same way. Like, we could hit it really hard, and then we would just have an emotional breakdown, and then it was no problem. And so if you're struggling, really cradle yourself, like literally hug yourself, and just realize you were a baby that felt very, very lost. And the amazing thing is you are an adult now that can take care of that baby. So you could spend, when people ask me what I do for a living, I often just point to my body, and I just say, I take care of this. And other people can have other jobs, but this is my job, because it's hard for me to be in the world. I didn't have some really basic tools. So that allows me to not work the same as other people, to rest more, to be more sensitive. And I'm finding that all these things that I thought I couldn't do, like I couldn't show that kind of weakness, but But when I do it now, just like and own it, nobody has a problem with it. They just that's me. It's the owning it. And I think that this um I'm interested. I have to do it in baby steps, but I'm interested what I'll do when I'm very strong. I'm a little afraid of my anger, but I'm dealing with it. I'm gonna figure it out.